introduce our guest speaker. Jim and I served together in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, and I'm very happy to say he's also my friend. He was Finance Minister, the Finance Minister, who calmly and efficiently steered Canada through what is now known as the Great Recession, with a recovery that has amazed experts in financial centers around the world. In New York, somebody referred to him as the best finance minister in the world. Jim, thank you for coming here tonight. Welcome.
Well, a tall person is standing. Sorry. I'm flattered by being referred to as the best finance minister of whatever. Yes, I'm fully cognizant of the fact that I have to work on being the tallest finance minister and have some work to do there. Thank you, Terence, for mentioning our triplets. They've aged a little bit. They're now 20, 20, and 20, and and in university and college and all of that. For those of you who are planning to have children or grandchildren, you can encourage. Well, I believe in it. I am a Minister of Finance who believes in effectiveness and efficiency. It's very efficient to have multiple children, so I encourage you to encourage the creation of children all at one time. We also have a demographic challenge in this country, as you know. So the quicker people can have multiples, the better, to ensure that they can support us in our old age as we go forward. I thank you all for being here tonight. We are in the midst, of course, of an election campaign. We're down to less than 3 weeks. I won't go on too long. I'll try not to go on too long, mindful of the fact that the Prime Minister and the other leaders are going to start a debate, a very important debate in the English language very shortly, which I'm sure many of you will want to observe. I feel a bit, the need for brevity is important. I feel a bit like the body at an Irish wake. You know, they need you there to have the party, but they don't expect you to say very much. I try to be careful about Irish stories now because, yeah, as you know, Ireland's been through a very difficult time in the past year, and we've given them lots of advice, I must say, in the last year. Like the former Irish Taoiseach, which is the Prime Minister of Ireland, Colin there, got into a bit of trouble. He was the Minister of Finance before that, and then became the Taoiseach in Ireland. And when I met with him there earlier last year, before the big collapse in Ireland, he was telling me the story of the Irish speaker, the politician who got up and in a crowd like this and was going on a bit long, and then longer, and then longer, and then some people were leaving by that door and some people leaving by that door, until finally there was just one fellow right in front of him. And he stopped speaking and he said, "I just want to thank you, sir, for having the decency to hear me out, to let me get to the end of my remarks." And the fellow stood up and he said, "Don't thank me. I'm the next speaker." They have more fun in Irish politics. I'm not sure their economics is quite right, but they've had more fun. Terence is a great friend, and an old friend, but in the best sense of the word. We served together 95 to 99 in the government of the province of Ontario under the leadership of Premier Harris, a time of significant change for our province, thank goodness. Terence served as the parliamentary assistant, as they say in the province, to the Minister of Finance, Minister of Education, and took on a lot of responsibility. Has done that in Ottawa. I admire perseverance. You know, when I first ran provincially in 1990, Mike Harris was a new leader, and in my own riding of Whitby Ajax, it was called then the candidate. You know, remember David Peterson decided that he was at 52% in the polls or whatever, and that he would take the people for granted and call an election. Oh, what a lesson learned, huh? Oh, what a lesson learned. And he gave us Bob Ray. You know, thank you, David. Our candidate in my riding was a very good candidate who had run before us, but she was 8 months pregnant when David Peterson decided to call the election, so we had no one. So they asked me to run, and I did run, and we didn't have much money and all. We raised the money. I raised it through some of my lawyer friends in Toronto and so on. I ran, and we ran very hard, and the election, as you'll recall, that year was right after Labor Day, and right after Labor Day, they counted the ballots, and I came third. And it is a character-building experience to run in your own community and come third. I admire Terence for his perseverance in Oakville in this very important matter for us. You know, some of our colleagues, as Terence and I know well, running as Conservatives in Alberta or Saskatchewan. Oh my goodness, what a joy that must be. These are not joys that we share in the Greater Toronto area. You know, we have to run hard every election. When I ran for the first time federally a few years ago, I resigned my provincial seat, ran federally. I was prepared to get out of politics, quite frankly, but I thought it was Stephen Harper had a proposal for Canada, a plan for Canada that was worth fighting for our country. And I ran against a Liberal incumbent who had been elected 3 times. And we won, but we only won by, well, about 2%. We've built that up a little bit since then. Terence ran, as you know, in that same election in 2006, and you supported him, lost by a little bit, and then had the perseverance and the courage to come back, continue to advance the cause, and win Oakville for the Conservative Party of Canada in 2008. Good for you, and we're going to do it again this year. Now, Terence works hard. He is, not only does he persevere on behalf of the government, we get up early in Ottawa. You know, we meet early on Wednesday mornings as the GTA caucus. We are well, it's self-serving of me to say that's the most important caucus for our party. I mean, we are, because if we don't win these seats in the GTA and keep the seats we have, like my seat and Terence's seat, then we're not going to form a majority government. And why are we having an election? You know, we're having an election because at a cost of about $350 million, which we could use for healthcare, education, universities, and so on. I'm sure Sheridan College could use $350 million or part of it. Why are we having? We're having an election because the leader of the opposition, the visiting professor, has decided. He's decided that he wants to be Prime Minister of Canada. Now he knows he's not going to win the most seats on election day. He knows that, and he's been told that by the people that give him advice. So what is he planning to do? He's planning to form a coalition with the NDP. He will not form a coalition with the Bloc Québécois. And the reason he won't is they won't join a formal coalition because they don't believe in our country. Terence and I sit in the House of Commons for year after year and look across the hall, across the aisle, day after day, and I see 50 members of the Bloc Québécois who do not believe in our country. Now, they believe in their salary from the taxpayers of Canada. They believe in the pension plan from the taxpayers of Canada, but they do not believe in our country. So how do you form a coalition? Why do I think that? Let me tell you just 3 things that have really struck me in the past couple of years. One is December 2008. Canada was in a very serious financial situation, economic situation, as was the world. This was the worst global recession since the 30s, now referred to, what happened just a couple of years ago, as the Great Recession. And the Prime Minister and I talked in December 2008, and then we were doing our pre-budget consultations. He and I agreed we would do the earliest budget in Canadian history on January 27th, 2009. I was listening to Canadians. I was here in Oakville listening. But I particularly remember in Saskatoon on December 15th or so, listening to business leaders in Western Canada. Some had come from Eastern Canada, academic leaders, just listening across the board. They weren't all Conservatives, that's for sure. This was Minister of Finance roundtables. And realizing how serious the situation was. This was a situation in which we could have had double-digit unemployment in Canada. We could have had millions of Canadians out of work. We could have had thousands of Canadian businesses fail and not be there at the end of the recession. The degree of uncertainty internationally, and I was talking to all of my colleagues in Europe and the United States and Australia, Japan, around the world, the degree of uncertainty was frightening. This was a very dangerous time for the world. I was back in Ottawa. Mr. Mulclair, the finance critic for the NDP, comes and sees me in my Parliament Hill office. I wasn't quite sure what he wanted, but I saw him. He came in. He wanted to give me a bit of advice about the budget, and he said, by the way, it doesn't matter, Jim. And I said, why doesn't it matter? He says, because you won't be the Minister of Finance next week. Anyway, we're taking over. That was when, people forget this, you know, this is only a couple of years. Mr. Ignatieff signed with the other Liberal members of Parliament that he supported this coalition. The coalition was with the Bloc Québécois and the NDP, with the Bloc Québécois saying they would support, of course, not join the government, and the NDP was going to have cabinet ministers and the whole, they had this whole thing cooked up. And then we come to the budget this year, a very important planning budget for Canada to get us back to balance after we get through the spending of the Economic Action Plan. And Mr. Ignatieff says, well, I don't need to read the budget. We're going to vote against the budget. Okay, well, why is he saying that? You know, he's a professor, he's smart, I guess, and you'd think he'd want to read it before he decided to vote against it, but okay, not all professors are perfect. And then we get Mr. Duceppe, who says to me, you give us $16 billion of new spending in Canada, $8 billion for Quebec, and I'll vote for the budget. That was a very short conversation. That wasn't going to happen. And then we get Mr. Layton, who said, I want to talk, I want to negotiate. So we did. And this is in the context, we had 5 minority budgets in a row. From our time of election in 2006. That's a record in Canadian history. The reason we were able to pass 5 minority budgets in a row is that we worked with the opposition. We tried to make Parliament work. And we did, as I say, a record in Canadian history, 5 budgets in a row. I thought this year, and I guess woe was me, I thought Mr. Layton was serious about it until 4 days before the budget, when big signs, billboards went up in Canada, in Montreal specifically, the NDP election billboards, and that's when I thought, well, all our discussions with the union leaders and with Mr. Layton and all the rest were a waste of time, and that I had to say, okay, now I see. Mr. Ignatieff says he doesn't need to read it, Mr. Duceppe makes ridiculous demands, and Mr. Layton wasn't sincere in his negotiations with us. So that's the second point about the coalition. The third one is now we're in an election campaign. The Prime Minister and I have made it clear that we will bring back our budget. It hasn't been voted on yet in the House of Commons. And what happens in this campaign, Mr. Ignatieff, then Mr. Duceppe, then Mr. Layton all say we will vote against the budget. Which means if we end up in a minority situation, the government will be defeated quite quickly, within a matter of a month or 45 days. And then Mr. Ignatieff will go to the Governor General. He'll ask to form a government. He will form a government with the NDP, and the Bloc will demand certain things that the Bloc wants. And that's how our government will be run, our country will be run for a time. This is undesirable for our country. I think it's very important that we elect a majority government. It's very important that Terence return to Parliament. We are on the cusp of greatness. We are growing our trade with the emerging economies. We're negotiating free trade agreements with Europe and India. Our trading relationship with China has never been stronger and better. Our universities are strong. Our colleges are good. We're on the right track. We need to stay the course. If we can, this future, this century, will belong to Canada. We have a brilliant future together, and thank you for supporting my friend Terence.